Okay, moving right along. Here we are on 19. And look at that. It's that same picture that you saw a little bit before. But now we're not looking at the epidermis. We have covered the epidermis. We are now looking at the dermis. And we have all kinds of cells in the dermis. So the dermis has all kinds of different kinds of cells in it. You have this epithelial cells. These keratinocytes are there that make up things like the outside of a hair follicle. Then you have glandular tissues. We had said you've got sweat glands, we've got the oil glands, all that stuff. You have connective tissue, irregular connective tissue. You have muscle that helps to make your hair stand on end when you're scared. That's what makes it do that. And then we have, remember we said in the epidermis we have Merkel disc. And what were they? Smooth. They sense that light touch. Now in the dermis, we have Meissner corpuscles that are up high in the dermis. Smooth. They do the same thing. And then deep, we have the Pacinian corpuscles. They're the pressure detectors. They're found deep in the dermis. And then we have other nerves and blood vessels. So let's go and look. So we're on slide 20 now. On slide 20, you see the arrow. Look at the arrow. They're like little finger-like structures that are extending up kind of into the epidermis. And we had said that bottom of that epidermis, we have stratum basale. And we said, for those cells, life is good. Why? Because in these little finger-like structures, which we call dermal papillae, we have capillaries and nerves and all of the stuff that's necessary to support the epidermis. Really, it's the capillaries that are the main thing. That we do have the nerves that are extending to the Merkel disc. But the capillaries, those are blood vessels that are providing nutrients and carrying off waste from stratum basale, right? So this upper layer, this one that's kind of like those fingers that you can see there, it's the papillary layer, dermal papillae. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look carefully, you have two fingers. So you have an arrow. I'm looking at my slide behind my phone here. You have an arrow to one of the fingers. I want you to look at the next one over. And right up at the tip, there's a little round thing. That's a Meissner's corpuscle. You can see it in the slide. This is actually a photograph of a slide. And so you notice it's right there next to the epidermis. Why is that important? It's for fine touch. You've got to be near the surface for that. So you have this pattern of dermal papillae, and you know what else they do? Look, can you see my fingerprint? Probably not, but it is the dermal papillae that makes the ridges that form my fingerprint. Yeah, that's cool, huh? So if you think about that layer, so we have the epidermis, and it's pretty narrow, right? And then we have this dermal papillae layer that's maybe equally thick or maybe less. And so then most of the dermis is not going to be the dermal papillae or papillary layer. It's going to be the next layer down, which is called the reticular layer. And this is where all of those blood vessels and all of that connective tissue is, and you can pull on your skin and it has a lot of strength to it. It's because of the connective tissue and other material that are just below the skin. This is also where if you push hard and you say, wow, I can feel pressure, Pacinian corpuscles, they're in this deeper portions of the dermis. So the dermis, which is the second layer in, has the papillary layer, and beneath it, the reticular layer. Reticular means kind of like a spider web. It's mixed up everything going in every which direction, and that's sort of describing it. Now, maybe you see I got a long, they call it the lifeline, right? Madam Curari down on the highway, she said, "Whoa, you got a long lifeline." I didn't go. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. These flexure lines that you have in the palms of your hands and on your feet, it's the connections between this papillary layer and the structures below. So what did we say? We said the reticular layer and below. So flexure lines are from the connections with the reticular layer, and fingerprints are from the dermal papillae. The final layer we're going to talk about is this subcutaneous layer. And this is what they also call the hypodermis. And this is sort of the in-between layer between the skin and the structures below. It has a lot of fat and blood vessels and nerves that are making their way up into the dermis. Obviously, they have to come through this layer. And there's only really one thing of real importance that we talk about here. We had said those Pacinian corpuscles are deep in the reticular layer of the dermis. They're also in the hypodermis. So if you say, okay, I should probably know, you should, where we find Pacinian corpuscles, that would be the reticular layer of the dermis and the hypodermis. You should also know, where do we find Meissner's corpuscles? In the dermal papillae, and Merkel disc there in the stratum basale of the epidermis. So you need to know all these kinds of things. There's more than what I just said just then, but all this stuff I've been talking about. So finally, for today, we're at slide number 23, and we see a beautiful colored glossy photograph of skin or diagram of skin. And you would say, okay, I look at that and I see epidermis. I see dermis. I see hypodermis. And a whole lot of other stuff. That other stuff comes later. Okay, so those are what we called the dermal derivatives, and so all that stuff that's in the skin that isn't really skin, we'll talk about that next time. Have a good day.